Evidence instruction number 4. You ready? Pretty simple, straightforward. Witnesses never, ever agree. They don't. This thing could happen 2 hours ago, whatever it is. Some monumental event can happen 2 hours ago. Get all your witnesses together. They're not going to agree. They aren't. They're just not going to agree. And guess what? The order in which they are interviewed is critically important to how the disagreement appears. Because they're going to disagree, and you're going to go, what? How can this just happened? How can you not agree on that issue? Well, sometimes the order in which they are interviewed will explain the disagreement. Let me just say this to you. When I get called out in the middle of the night for a homicide, I try to be very, very specific about my instructions to the dispatcher. Because I'm going to get called out. I got my bag sitting by my bed. It's ready to go. I'm on call that week, so I know it could happen. And then I'm going to get that call at 3 in the morning. They're going to say, Wallace, yeah, okay, great. We got a homicide at the corner of whatever and whatever. And I'm going to say, I've got one thing I'm going to ask. You got officers on the scene, right? This is my jury instruction. This is my request of dispatchers. You got officers on the scene, right? Yep. Okay, great. This is my only request. Have them separate the eyewitnesses. The only thing I ask for before I leave my house en route to a homicide scene is have the officers on scene separate the eyewitnesses. Now, why would I do that? Well, because if you don't separate those eyewitnesses, they're going to be sitting. I had a case like that where I had a homicide on a rainy night. And so I had 3 or 4 eyewitnesses. And, the police unit gets there and it's like pouring. And so what does he do? He puts all of the eyewitnesses in the back of a unit. And for an hour, they're sitting in the back of the unit together before I get there. And that's not a good thing, right? Because now they've had an hour to discuss the case. And when I get there and pull them out, I'm going to have 4 people that are going to describe the events the exact same way. Because they've already straightened out in their mind what they think. They've harmonized their account. Because they've been sitting waiting for me for an hour. No, I don't want that. I want to get there and find 4 accounts that are going to seem to be conflicting in places. I get that, but I'll figure out why that's the case, why it appears to be that way. I also know that in the end, this is all going to be able to puzzle back together again. That's my job as a detective. Don't you guys try to figure it out. Let me figure it out. I want to retain the apparently contradictory appearance of these 3, 4, 5 eyewitness statements. That's my job. My job is to puzzle. Don't you say, well, look, I think he had a gun in his waistband. The other one says, no, I think that was a shiny belt. Okay, maybe you were right. Maybe it was a belt. No, don't do that. Don't you try to harmonize this. Let me do that. That's my job. So I'll show you something here. This is why, by way of illustration, that might help you. So let's say we had a robbery, and the first person interviewed is this young lady you see on your screen. And she says, okay, I'm describing the robber. She says, he wore a white T-shirt and jeans. His hair was short. He did yell a lot. Okay, great. Now, what is she doing here? Now, hopefully I've successfully separated the eyewitnesses, so she's talking to me privately, and she's really covering 3 categories of information. What did he wear? What did he look like? What did he say? So now I get the next person brought over to me by an officer, and here he comes, and he says something slightly different. He says, well, he wore a T-shirt and jeans. Okay, it's kind of close, and his hair was blonde. He demanded money. Slightly different, some new information here. But again, at least he's talking in the same 3 categories. What did he wear? What did he look like? What did he say? Now, my third witness, I get separated. He comes over now, and I interview him. He says something a little bit more. He says he wore a short sleeve shirt, jeans. He was white. Okay, that's something that he screamed at the clerk. Slightly different. I can see how all 3 statements could be simultaneously true, but they are slightly different. Again, at least he's covering the same 3 categories, right? What did he wear? What did he look like? What did he say? Now, you may have noticed in the background, in the shadows there, this 4th witness. What if this is a guy who I never even knew was a witness? What if this is a guy who is kind of sitting back there listening to all of this, but he's also the fourth witness on this? I just didn't know. He was never identified to me as the fourth witness. I hate when that happens. It does happen on occasion, because now he's been overhearing the testimony of the others, and I got a problem now, because if I bring him in, here he comes. So here's our fourth witness. He comes into the thing, and now I'm going to get a chance to interview him. And now he says to me, because he's listened to the other three, hey, he's a regular customer. And afterwards, he ran out to a white van. What in the world? Okay, wait a minute. This is like, not only is it new information, two new pieces of information, no one else ever said this, but he's not even in the same three categories of the first three witnesses. Remember, those categories are on the screen there. What did he wear? What did he look like? What did he say? This guy's talking about categories that are completely different. He's talking about who was he and what did he do afterwards. Why is he doing that? Why is it that he's not even sticking to the same categories? Well, that's because he heard the first three. And after hearing the first three, he already knows what you know. He knows what's been said to you. So he's going to come in, and being the good guy that he is, he's going to fill in some blanks for you, make some clarifications for you based on what he also knows. And although it might sound like it's in a different category, the only reason why he's offering it to you this way is because he knew what they had offered and what they had left out. And look, if you'd have asked them, if you'd have dug deeper with those first three, if you'd have been questioning them, they might have given you this information, but you didn't ask those kinds of questions, and now this guy kind of wants to fill it. Now, why do I say this to you? Why do I show you this? Let's go to Scripture. Here's a scene. We have several eyewitness accounts, or several accounts that are at least at some point given by an eyewitness to somebody who chronicles it. We actually have 4. And I'll give you the first one. Here's your first witness. So in an early gospel, as they reclined at the table, and eating, Jesus said, "Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me." Now clearly this account is trying to offer 2 pieces of data. Where were they? What did Jesus say? Let's go to another account, another gospel of the same event. As they were eating, he said, "Truly I say to you that one of you will betray me." Similar. Not exactly the same, though, but similar. Again, at least these are covering the same 2 data points. Where were they? What did Jesus say? Let's go to a third. We're capturing the accounts of Mark, Matthew, and Luke. "But behold, the hand of the one betraying me is with mine on the table." That's kind of, okay, I can see how I could harmonize this, but man, that's a new way of saying it. Again, but at least he's answering these questions. Where were they? What did Jesus say? So now we have 3 different accounts from eyewitnesses, or people who are chronicling eyewitnesses, 3 different gospel accounts that are slightly different. And then we get a 4th guy who you can see in our illustration here has been hiding out there in the shadows. This knucklehead now is going to get interviewed by our, or at least offer an account. So here he is hiding in the shadows. Let's move him up here. And he's now going to move up. And what does he do? He says, "There was reclining on Jesus' bosom one of his disciples, whom Jesus loved. So when he had dipped the morsel, he took and gave it to Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot. After the morsel, Satan then entered into him. Therefore Jesus said to him, 'What you do, do quickly.'" What? Wait a minute. Back up a second. Okay, this is not even in the same 2 categories that the first 3 were offering. In fact, now, instead of just sticking with where were they and what did Jesus say, you get all this extra stuff. Who was his favorite? What did Jesus do, or did Judas do afterwards? I mean, this is what? What's happening here is exactly what happens in eyewitness accounts we get in real time after a homicide. Because what happens is, you've got a guy named John, and I think most scholars would agree that John's account comes last. And what John does is not lie. I can still harmonize all of this. I can still see how this fits into the puzzle of eyewitness accounts. But he is doing what all late witnesses do if they know what the first 3 said. He's filling in details and data. If he didn't know what the first 3 said, if he thought nothing had been said yet, he might have written this very, very differently. Let me just say one more thing that might be a little bit more abstract, but I want you to get your hands around it, okay? It's bad enough if, as an investigator, I decided to interview 4 eyewitnesses, and I had a set of questions that I wrote down on a pad of paper. The exact same questions are now asked of each eyewitness. Even if I did that, there will still be apparent contradictions between answers. And I'm the same guy interviewing all four. Now, if that happened, I'm going to ask follow-up questions. But I'm just saying, if I was not allowed to ask a follow-up question, and all I was allowed, or a clarifying question, and all I was allowed to do was to ask, these 5 questions on my pad of paper, I am going to get what people later on would say, I see a contradiction. Believe me, defense attorneys do this all the time. Even worse, though, if I'm tied up on the crime scene and I say, guys, my team is a 5-man team. Do me a favor. I need you to survey the entire neighborhood. I want you to go door to door, knock on all the doors, find any eyewitnesses if anybody saw anything. And I want you all to interview those eyewitnesses. Now, those 5 guys might go out. And guess what? They aren't share the same pad of paper with the same 6 questions or 5 questions on it. Now, each is taking up their own ideas, asking it from their own perspective. So it turns out it's not just the variants that occur if you have 1 interviewer and 4 witnesses, but if you have 4 interviewers and 4 witnesses, oh my gosh, the variation is going to be extreme because he didn't think to ask the same questions this guy asked. Now think about the Gospels for a second. You have really more the second scenario than the first. It's not as though one person went out, like Lee Strobel went out and said, Taylor, I'm going to do the case for Christ, so I'm going to do it 2,000 years earlier. I'm going to go out and ask you guys what really happened. And then he, knowing what he asked of the others, can clarify these things as he goes. That's not how this works. I would expect there to be the level of variation between accounts that we see in the Gospels if it happened just as we believe it happened. I would expect to see variation. As a matter of fact, when I was a new investigator of this, and I was not yet a Christian, I didn't stumble at all. I mean, I saw all the various. Believe me, I was using forensic statement analysis on the Gospels, and I saw all the differences. It didn't bug me because I knew that that's what you see in reliable eyewitness statements. As a matter of fact, that was the thing that piqued my interest, that the variation I saw between accounts seemed to be very consistent with the variation I saw between eyewitness statements. Thanks so much for watching our video. If it was helpful and useful to you, I'd really appreciate it if you would follow us, subscribe to our channel at the bottom link here in the video, and tell your friends. And please follow us on social media.